Alright, welcome to another episode of the Daily Space Weather videos here on the smAsho channel. I'm your host, smAsho, and we're looking at the sun on 193 angstroms here. We've got a lot of stuff to cover. We're going to cover the "that is censored" and "that is a hole in the ground" portion in the same video here today. Before we do any of that, let's look at all the space weather data. Again, 193 angstroms showing us a giant Earth-facing T-shaped coronal hole. The North Pole coronal hole is actually looking very large right now, and the South Pole coronal hole is looking a little shrunken. Let's look at 304 angstroms. We see some filamentary activity there in the east, especially the northeast. Otherwise, pretty low levels of solar activity. The solar wind has ramped up a little bit in density, and the 10.7 centimeter radio flux remains at solar minimum conditions, 66 solar flux units. Here's 171 angstroms view. My personal favorite. Let's move on to more data. But first, let's talk about supporting the channel. Please support the channel via Patreon. We're about to have one tier. It's going to be $10. Possibly $9.99 per month. So support us there, as YouTube pays us absolutely nothing to make these videos, but they show you advertisements anyway, because they think our channel's monetized, and that means monetized for Google, not for us. Also, you can support us via PayPal too, so you can do anonymous donations there if you like. Also, if you're in the market for CBDs, check out the Hemp Lucid Spaced Out campaign. And don't worry about the fact that that's censored and that's a hole in the ground. Buy yourself some CBDs, reduce your inflammation, perhaps increase your health, your quality of life with CBD products. Sales going on in the whole plant hemp seed oil suspension, as well as on some Calci THC-free products specifically designed for athletes. And there's all kinds of stuff like body cream and lip balm and wax and so on. Again, the Hemp Lucid Spaced Out campaign, specifically designed for our spaced out viewers, is linked below the video. Let's look at more data, such as the real-time solar wind. And we are looking at a phi angle of 326. Surprisingly, no magnetic connection with that coronal hole. Although the Earth is not out of the earthquake danger zone, as that coronal hole is facing the Earth directly. Would see no surprise in a sudden 180-degree phi angle here. Solar wind density is at 4.62, so it's ramped up from yesterday as the solar wind speed ramps down. There was a coronal mass ejection also, appearing to be in a trajectory that will miss the Earth to the south. We'll cover it in a minute. And there's the ACE data, looking similar to Discover. Again, 10.7 centimeter radio flux, 66 solar flux units, legitimate solar minimum conditions. Now, I'm going to talk about the thermosphere index for a quick moment. You can look this up on spaceweather.com. I would note that the thermosphere is not quite as cold as it was back around 2009 and 2010, the last solar minimum. See these figures right here. Thermosphere a little warmer than it was back then, and that is a good thing, folks, because you don't want the solar minimum to be too deep, as cold kills. Magnetosphere movies are next. We'll show you the density and the pressure. And there's the density first, looking at 4 hours of data here. And thanks to our new viewers for increasing our subscribership on YouTube. We're going to talk social media at the end of the video, as social media is quite a mess these days, and we've got some interesting articles about it too. So nothing too extravagant here going on with the solar wind density. And the effects on the magnetosphere are not particularly exciting. Also, we'll look at the pressure. Here's the pressure. After this, we're going to look at the ground geospace magnetic perturbations to look at the data a little closer to home. So we see a pretty low pressure here, Again, solar wind speed has ramped down following that high-speed coronal hole wind stream where it was pegged at about 500 kilometers per second all day. Here are the ground magnetic perturbations. We're not expecting to see too much action here, but if you don't look, you may not know. Let that load. This is 4 hours of data, also courtesy University of Michigan Geospace Model. If you want to learn about the space weather modeling framework, click on yesterday's video. We talk about it momentarily. And we provide links in the description. So yeah, check out 2 videos ago. Not that that is censored and that is a hole in the ground, but the daily space weather from yesterday, August 28th. So minor perturbations there, nothing to write home about. KP index is at 0, so the cosmic ray flux, human health alerts, and so on are kind of in effect right now. We're not going to cover cosmic rays today as there's too much stuff to cover. Here's the F2 ionosphere layer. And we are looking at the last 6 hours. It's looking pretty normal here. Nothing really to write home about there. There's the latest image at 8 UT. Looking a little discharged on both the sun and nighttime side. But again, nothing too extravagant. X-ray flux remains flatlined since July 7th, the last time we had a B flare, and it was a small one. Electron flux is looking smooth. Not a big dip in the electron flux caused by yesterday's high-speed wind stream, but a slight dip as we typically see with coronal hole wind streams. Here's a location of things like planets and the moon. And there's where they'll be in 1 week. Let's bring up the LASCO C3. You're going to see a coronal mass ejection down in this area where my pointer is. It looks like it's headed to the southwest. It's pretty small. It's right toward the end, right there. You can see a little bit of ejecta coming out. Does not look anything like a halo ejection. And the view from stereo A confirms that that is fairly southern facing and western facing. If you're wondering what these objects are, this is Venus here. Here's Mars. And over here is Mercury swinging around to blow past everybody. GOES magnetometer is looking much smoother than it had been following that heliospheric polarity boundary crossing. Looking smooth as forecasted. Here's the Gong 2 data. There is a battle for supremacy going on over here, probably caused by an active region south of the solar equator on the far side. Otherwise, again, low solar activity and smooth magnetic sailing expected for the next at least 48 hours. Here's a view from stereo A. You can see that coronal mass ejection there. Again, that's to the south and west of the Earth, apparently. Moving on to the location of things like stars. I would note the summer triangle, consisting of Altair, Vega, and crowd favorite Deneb. And when I say crowd favorite, I mean human civilization itself, who apparently kept building monolithic structures in the Stone Age that faced the other precessional North Pole, Deneb. Earthquake rundown. We see 4.4 at Argentina, which is the main location we've been warning for larger earthquakes. Earthquake risk has not expired, folks. At least 48 more hours of earthquake risk. I'll say 36 more hours of earthquake risk. We see a swarm of earthquakes across Alaska. And let's go up the list here. 5.3 South Sandwich Islands. That's about 22 and a half hours ago. Here's a 5.1 at the South Sandwich Islands, as we saw an uptick in the activity there. 4.9 at Greece. Uptick there also. 4.7 at Russia. And that one is kind of near Japan. Here's a 4.9 at Chile. That one's at depth. Again, Western South America. That's the zone I would warn about. 5.0 at India. There's a 4.9 at Chile. A 5.1 at the South Sandwich Islands, as we've seen an increase there. There was a 6.6 magnitude 2 days ago there. 4.5 coming in about 8 hours ago here at Número Blanco, Finca Blanco Número Uno, Panama. 6.1 at Japan, that's the largest of the past 24 hours. That one coming in about 8 hours ago, 9 hours ago also. 4.9 at the South Sandwich Islands. And lastly, another deep quake there at Peru. Western South America is still my favorite choice for a larger quake, as the magnitude 7 earthquake drought continues. Here's the pressure maps courtesy windy.com. We'll let that play for about 24 hours. As we start to move on to bonus sections and get less spaced out and more earthly. I would note a massive anticyclone over Greenland. Check it out. Major anticyclone there over Greenland. Positive charge, anybody? Lots of protons there. Lots of protons. Volcano rundown. Stromboli showing up in thermal imaging with a large lava flow. Very high levels of activity at Stromboli. Shivaluch producing a 2,300-foot ash plume there, flight level 2,300. Kono exploding, producing a 6,000-foot ash plume via continuous volcanic emissions. Popocatépetl, sporadic emissions, so that's chilling out a little bit at Popocatépetl in central Mexico. Revenador producing some emissions there. Sabancaya exploding and producing a 24,000-foot ash plume. Please do not attempt to do a back handspring over the Sabancaya caldera. Here's the western jet streams. Extremely meridional jet stream flow going on above my head, as well as some extreme jet stream flows over here. Check this out. You're going to hear news of Greenland experiencing a heat wave right in this area because of this warm air being pulled down and yada, yada, yada. Let's look at the eastern jet. Here's the eastern hemisphere, this jet stream. Looking a little more normal on that side of the planet. And let's move on to the AccuWeather Doppler radar. There you have the U.S. We cover the whole world on Doppler radar, folks, but we've got limited time. Limited time. Living on borrowed time and borrowed money has us suggesting you should support our channel via Patreon. We're going to animate the whole map here, and then we are going to move on to the that is censored, and that is a hole in the ground. Looks like we have a Borg cube flying over the northern U.S. again, as we had about 2 days ago. Otherwise, fairly relaxed conditions as far as heavy storms over the U.S. Nothing to write home or get bunched up panties about. And thanks, new viewers, for tuning into the channel, as the subscribership seems to be growing. And now we've moved on to the that is censored, and that is a hole in the ground, as we appreciate when our viewers understand the distinction between their pack animal and a hole in the ground. So we cover various articles to help this. Speaking of censored, are you aware that big tech is rife with
censorship?
Now, we used to rail on the government for its
censorship,
but now we don't even need the government anymore because we have organizations like Google, who owns YouTube, by the way, as well as Twitter and Facebook and Apple and more. Let's cover some articles, such as this ingenious 14-year-old schoolgirl who knows nothing about atmospheric physics, called Thunberg. What's her name? Nina Thunberg, I believe. Knows ads. Oh, she's 16. I don't know. She's 16. She's 14. I don't care. Oh, she came on August 14th. She sailed a boat to the U.S. Oh, there she is. She's really mad. She wants you to be terrified about the fact that the planet's warming. Complete nonsense. Apparently she is from Sweden, and she hasn't been watching the record snowfall 2 winters in a row in the Northern Hemisphere. She's probably going to tell you that Greenland's melting also. And she sailed here on a boat to have zero carbon footprint, except a whole bunch of people had to fly to Sweden in order to get on the boat with her, producing tons and tons and tons of carbon. A ridiculous idea. She's going to be talking to the UN and spreading complete nonsense about the climate, suggesting that it's warming and suggesting that it has anything to do with carbon dioxide, especially human emissions. Let's talk about another article here, this one on Cosmos Magazine, Climate Change Implicated by a Flood of Data. Would that be a flood of data like record snowfall 2 years in a row in the Northern Hemisphere? The most snow ever last winter, followed by the most snow ever. Just the most snow ever, causing record melt. By the way, if you're not aware of the way atmospheric physics works, folks, if you have a relative humidity at a given level and the barometric pressure stays at the same level it's at, and you simply drop the temperature, guess what happens? Precipitation. Cold is what causes precipitation, folks. If you have relative humidity at a given level and atmospheric pressure at a given level and it's raining, and suddenly the temperature goes up, guess what happens? It stops raining. That's the way precipitation works, which is why floods and record snowfall are not an indication of global warming. Okay, let's talk about Saturn's strange magnetic field and how it makes liquid flow like honey inside the planet. Now, this is not fully understood. However, when Cassini took a suicide run, it made a remarkable discovery indicating that the liquid interior might be viscous, flowing like honey. Anyway, read the article. It's pretty interesting. Saturn is believed to have a liquid metallic hydrogen layer in it, as well as some other interesting stuff, as it's kind of interesting cosmology here. And we're not going to get too into things like Robitaille's ideas about liquid metallic hydrogen sun, although it's probably what the sun's made out of. Let's talk about the Gaia mission here, mapping out a whole bunch of local stars, their motions, and so on. Here's the map. And let me get that off the screen so I can show you the article. Anyway, the European Space Agency here, tracing strings. Super interesting article here about the local population of stars in the galaxy, giving us some insight into perhaps the way that these local stars are connected to each other. Here's a great image of the Milky Way. And our spaced out viewers are probably pretty well aware of the way cosmology is being rewritten, as well as astrophysics. So read the article. It's not going to tell you too much information, but it is going to be in the news today. So prepare yourself. Let's talk about conservatives being targeted by a complex fourth-generation warfare campaign. If you think it's not true, folks, well, it's true, folks. And links to this article also below the video on Alt Market. That's alt-market.com. Now, let's talk about guilt by association. Have you heard about the social credit system in China, where if you're a you-know-what poster in China, if you are what we would call a deplorable in the U.S., you're, critical of the government and so on, and if you are one of these meme posters from Facebook, and you're in China, guess what'll happen? You won't be able to buy a plane ticket or a bus ticket or a ferry boat ticket or a train ticket. Why? I have no idea. I guess to limit your travel capabilities so you can't spread the truth about things. Anyway, check this out. Silicon Valley, companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and Apple, looking to manipulate human behavior. Yes. Teaming up with authoritarian governments to screw people over as much as possible. They kept this gentleman out of the U.S. because of posts that his friend put up. So apparently his friend is critical of the U.S. government or something like that, which has caused him to be prevented from entering the U.S. Now, Ajawi, I'm not sure if he's a jihadi. I don't think he probably is. He's got a scholarship to some sort of university in the U.S. They're trying to work it out and get him back into the country here, as it seems a little ridiculous for social media to affect any of this stuff. Links to this article as well below the video. Talk about the Federal Reserve. Now, I don't know what you know about the Federal Reserve or not, but capitalism has not existed on this planet since 1913, when the world's largest economy, known as the U.S., fell victim to central banking. On December 23rd, Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act into effect, thereby eliminating capitalism. Now, the largest block of business in the world is the interest on international and corporate loans. Do you think it's capitalism for a banking authority made up of a group of private banks to artificially adjust those interest rates? Would you be outraged if your local grocery stores all got together and decided to manipulate the cost of apples or milk or perhaps eggs? Well, the market on money has not been free since 1913, and the US dollar has been devalued over 97% over that period of time. If you weren't aware, it's true. By the way, an ounce of gold still buys you a nice suit and a pair of shoes, just like it bought you in ancient Greece. Because the value of gold only changes when we do stuff like discover more gold. Anyway, an interesting article about central banking, as a lot of people think that the government controls the Fed and that the Fed doesn't control the government. Well, sadly, government spending is completely regulated by interest rates, as the government has painted itself into a corner and the Fed has painted itself into a corner. And now Trump is talking about how he wants lower interest rates because Trump doesn't care about inflation, because when you have billions of dollars, slight devaluation of your dollars means nothing, but to poor people, slight devaluation of your dollars means you may be living in a cardboard box as a result. So there you have it. Anyway, talking about the Fed overthrowing Trump and so on. If you weren't aware of this stuff, please follow us on social media. You'll see the post daily, places like Facebook. If you want to see some behind-the-scenes stuff, some more personal information about what goes on at the smAsho channel. Now, we don't like people tailgating us, so sometimes I do stuff like ride a bicycle with a machete.
I don't know about you, but I think nothing says don't tailgate me. Like strapped to the back of the bike.
Oh yeah, that's right. A freshly sharpened machete on the back of the bike. You want to see stuff like that? Check out Instagram.com/smAsho. Also, follow us on Twitter if you find it easier to share our posts. As we are as shadow banned as it gets, folks. Apparently, sharing a bunch of science information and actual insight into the economy is really subversive information nowadays. Censored versus sinkhole. We usually make it into two videos: space weather and censored versus sinkhole. A segment whose name keeps changing, like YouTube's ridiculous algorithms. Anyway, we're on Gab, is the point, as well as Minds.com, where I say, well done, Minds. You've effectively applied a shadow ban over a week's worth of posts. Because if you look at this image here, you'll notice that my boosts have all been refunded. Apparently the traffic has been so low on Minds that thousands and thousands of tokens worth of boosts have been refunded to the account because nobody saw the post. And I was wondering for the last week how I'm only getting 9 views, 8 views, 14 views. It's ridiculous. Apparently that's why. The traffic must be so low that we're not getting any views. So at least we've had our tokens refunded. Hey Minds, what's going on with your platform? How come it's not functioning? Minds.com/smAsho. The future of social media, despite low activity at the end of the summer. It'll pick up over the winter, folks, just like our subscribership will here on YouTube. If you haven't pressed like and subscribe, please do so. Press the notification bell, as we will start doing live streams again soon, such as our upcoming autumnal equinox stream, where we will stream live for about an hour and a half, centered around the autumnal equinox. So be an entropy buster. Support us on Patreon. And thanks, Smash Team, for all of your hard work and patience. We're not doing any bonus things. We're just ending it right here. And we're going to say, remember, when you're staring at the sun, don't drink. And if you drink, stare at the sun anyway. Just don't drive. Seriously, don't drive. I might be on the road at some point today. I don't want to see you there. And remember, when you're staring at the sun, don't drink. And if you drink, stare at the sun anyway. You'll probably be censored when you do so. And remember, since it'll never be now again, may the solar wind be at your back and the atherosclerosis absent from your veins.